Good morning. As the Canadian Coalition for the Foreign Influence Transparency Registry and Human Rights Coalition, we welcome all of you to our joint press conference today. We also like to give our heartfelt thanks to MP Jenny Kwan, who has traveled all the way from Vancouver to support all of us. I'm Gloria Fung. I'm the immediate past president of Canada Hong Kong Link. I'm also the convener of the Canadian Coalition for a Foreign Influence Transparency Registry. I will serve as the moderator of today's press conference. Our two coalitions consist of more than 40 multicultural diaspora community organizations across Canada, representing victims of foreign interference and transnational repression. Commissioner Hogue's final report confirms the warnings of diaspora communities and security experts, that is, interference from foreign actors, including China, Russia, India, and Iran, poses a major threat to Canada's democracy and national security. While her recommendations to the government are a good start, there are gaps to be dealt with, and more government action is needed urgently. Now, diaspora community representatives will share the comments and concerns about the final report of the Foreign Interference Commission. First of all, let us welcome Maria Cheung from the Falun Gong Human Rights Group. She will also speak on behalf of the FITA Coalition.
Thank you, Gloria. Good morning, everyone. I'm Maria Cheung from the Falun Gong Human Rights Group. Diaspora communities are heavily impacted by foreign interference, particularly transnational repression. They take the most of the brunt of it. From a diaspora perspective, I particularly highlight the following recommendations from Commissioner Hogue's report. We welcome Commissioner Hogue's proposal of a single, highly visible, and easily accessible point of contact or hotline for reporting foreign interference. We recommend that this also includes the reporting of transnational repression, with provision of confidentiality, anonymity, protections, and multilingual support. Secondly, foreign interference and transnational repression impact different diaspora groups differently in Canada, even they have the same perpetrators. Understanding their lived experiences and realities and working with them collaboratively are the key to effectively tailor appropriate responses to protect and support them. And number three, foreign interference will not stop, as Commissioner Hogue said, and continue to be sophisticated, persistent, and pervasive. We already see the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, has heightened its threat of transnational repression to diaspora communities recently. The governments must prioritize addressing transnational repression against diaspora communities in Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Next, we would like to invite Isabelle Terranova of Human Rights Action Group that provides legal counsel services to diaspora community groups of the Human Rights Coalition. Isabelle, please.
The Human Rights Coalition is a group of community organizations from the Uyghur, Tibetan, Hong Konger, Falun Gong, Tigrayan, Eritrean, Cuban, and Tamil communities that joined together to participate in the foreign interference inquiry in Canada. This week, the coalition released a joint statement in response to the inquiry's final report. We echo the Commissioner's call for the government to develop a comprehensive strategy to address transnational repression. We want to state that any attempt to combat transnational repression must address collaborations between authoritarian regimes and with proxy organizations. We speak a lot about Russia and China, and rightfully so, but if we fail to account for the role of other autocrats, we leave gaps and exclude various communities from the conversation. For example, Canada's ban on Russian state broadcasters is meaningless if stations like Cuba-Visión are allowed to broadcast on Canadian airwaves. As the coalition showed during the inquiry, Cuba-Visión replays Russian TV programming. This illustrates how our failure to address this kind of cooperation undermines efforts to combat transnational repression and foreign interference and incentivize Chinese and Russian alignment with smaller authoritarian regimes and struggling democracies. This week's statement urgently requests that the Canadian government take comprehensive measures to combat foreign interference and transnational repression. First, Canada must pursue new avenues to protect and provide support, including financial, physical, and psychological support to victims of transnational repression in Canada. The Canadian government must also consistently leverage existing laws and policies, including immigration and sanctions laws. For example, under the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, various existing provisions, such as removals for criminality, organized criminality, and espionage, could be leveraged to exclude perpetrators of transnational repression. Targeted sanctions laws could be used as well. No sanctions have been imposed by Canada in response to gross human rights violations perpetrated against Tigrayans, Eritreans, Cubans, or Hong Kongers. Finally, immigration laws should be used consistently to resettle vulnerable refugees. To date, no special stream has ever been created in response to a crisis in Africa. Finally, Canada should revoke counterproductive laws and policies, including those furthering cooperation with authoritarian regimes in criminal matters, such as the Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty with China and the extradition agreement with Cuba. These recommendations are particularly timely given yesterday's deportation of Uyghur detainees from Thailand to China. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabelle. Next, I would like to invite Sherap Therchin to speak. He's the director of the Canada Tibet Committee.
Thank you, Gloria. I'm Sherap Therchin, Executive Director of Canada Tibet Committee. I'd like to speak on that while Justice Commissioner Hogue's report acknowledges that the transnational repression couldn't be engaged and explored in depth, which is concerning to me because a lot of representatives from diaspora community testified on the public inquiry. But the testimonies from those who participated, those who took the risk of speaking out, doesn't seem to be included in the report. So someone like me, who was recently sanctioned by People's Republic of China, along with 19 other Canadians, including 2 of those who are with me here today. This sanction, we take it as a form of transnational repression. China has labeled us as a threat to their national security, sovereignty, and development interests. They have called us fake witness, fake victims. I think if that is not serious enough as a form of transnational repression for government to take it seriously, I'm not sure what is transnational repression. I've been saying this, in any media engagement I've had in the past 2 years, that the diaspora community dealing against, whether it's China, Russia, are the primary victims of transnational repression. And yet, the Commissioner Hogue's report admits that the engagement with the diaspora community on transnational repression couldn't be studied in depth. So I'll leave it to the media to decode what does it mean that it couldn't be studied in depth. Knowing the fact that, an unprecedented case of sanctions against ordinary Canadians who took the rights of speaking out for people who are oppressed by authoritarian regime, and in return what they get is sanctioned. Thank you. And as part of the sanction, we basically received online death threat on Twitter. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherap. Next, I would like to invite Joanne Michelle Hodges of the Human Rights Coalition. She is the facilitator of the Alliance of Genocide Victim Communities that has participated in the Foreign Interference Inquiry. Joanne, please.
So on behalf of the Human Rights Coalition, we also want to highlight that Commissioner Hogue found disinformation and misinformation is an existential threat to our nation's democracy. This is an incredibly serious issue that has deeply impacted each of our communities. But I would just like to highlight that the Falun Gong and the Tigrayan communities, for example, have faced multiple compounding ramifications, including a direct diminishment in their ability to participate in civic discourse due to misinformation and disinformation. And Canada should urgently work to protect these communities. Falun Gong activists have evidence from the highest level of the CCP government that there is a directive to use misinformation and disinformation to attack Falun Gong activists. In Tigray, there was a horrific genocide that led to the death of somewhere between 800,000 and 1 million people in 2 years. Hundreds of thousands of women were raped, and atrocities and the targeting of civilians continue to this day. And hardly anyone knows about it, partly because of a concerted and organized mis- and disinformation campaign. We also call for justice and accountability for mass human rights violations for the Tigrayan community, the Tamil community, and others like them. The Tamil community, who also experienced a genocide, has drawn a direct line between the ongoing impunity of the Sri Lankan government and the government's emboldened acts of transnational repression against them. We see the impact of decades of unchecked oppression in the Eritrean community, how so many Eritrean voices are viciously silenced, how the dictator in Asmara continues to impose a 2% diaspora tax on Eritrean refugees in Canada. And as a coalition, we call for the misuse of charitable funds and proxy organizations to intimidate and harass the Eritrean community to be investigated. And finally, let me just say how vitally important we think that it is that any steps in Canada that Canada takes to address transnational repression be transparent, and that discussions include all of the impacted communities. There's a real lack of transparency, for example, in the sanctions process in Canada. Currently, there is no procedure to address a request for the imposition of a sanction. There is no obligation on the government to consider a request. And if the government does consider a sanction request and decides to deny it, there's no obligation to inform the person or the organization requesting the sanctions that their request is actually being rejected. So it takes a great deal of organization and resources to submit a sanctions request in the first place, so we should keep that in mind. And we need collective action. Just as authoritarian regimes around the world are learning repressive tactics from one another and cooperating to carry out global campaigns to silence critics, we too need more collaboration, information sharing, and sharing of best practices when we talk about transnational repression. And we really must be careful not to exclude any of the groups that are directly affected.
Thank you, Joanne. Next, we would like to invite Marcus Kolga to speak. Marcus is the co-convener of the Canadian Coalition for Foreign Influence Transparency Act. He is also the president of the Central and Eastern European Council in Canada. Marcus, please.
Thanks, Gloria, for your leadership in organizing this press conference, and all the coalition members for your solidarity and your support, and of course, MP Kwan for your leadership in standing up for democracy and the victims of transnational repression. Thank you. Justice Hogue's final report is an important step in acknowledging the existential threat that disinformation and transnational repression pose to Canada's democracy and society. However, it's deeply concerning that it fails to acknowledge Russia's extensive and long-term information warfare against Canada. The Kremlin has spent years spreading disinformation, eroding trust in our institutions, and manipulating public discourse in Canada. Denying Moscow's intent to do so and dismissing this threat serves to embolden the Kremlin and its authoritarian allies, offering them a sense of impunity. With looming elections and ongoing nomination processes where we've already witnessed foreign interference, Canada cannot afford any delays in responding to these threats. The passage of Bill C-70 creates critical tools that enhance our ability to counter foreign interference. The swift implementation of all components of C-70 is essential to deterring and preventing foreign efforts to interfere in our elections, nominations, and the threats to intimidate Canadian activists, journalists, elected officials, and vulnerable community members. These rapidly escalating authoritarian threats require the swift and full implementation of these measures, along with robust enforcement and our unwavering collective resolve to defend our democracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. Now we would like to invite Henry Chan.
I'm over on this side.
Oh, yeah. And Henry is the co-director of Saskatchewan Stands with Hong Kong. He will speak, on the elections regulations and also on nomination and election. Henry, please.
Thank you, Gloria, for the introduction. I think for a lot of us, one of the most important aspect of the whole report is focus. One of the things we are very interested in, and we think it's of major importance to this country's democracy, is the nomination process, because the report names federal processes, but if we think about it, we also have, if my memory serves me correct, 714 provincial seats, which is about roughly 2,000 nominations, which are indeed subject to foreign interference. And I have seen it in person, and in a lot of these nominations, there are no rules at all. It is basically a gong show. And what is very important is that there is basically no, no rules against it other than the party trying to enforce their rules through volunteers. So what is very important is things like bribery, fraud, and stuff like that. Those needs to be legislated so they can be prevented, right? Because right now we see a lot of the nominations are being managed by different groups, including foreign regimes like China, India, Russia, etc. And it's vital because we are talking about the person that we see on the ballot. If you think about it, if a regime can, say, get all the nomination for all the different parties, then no matter how you vote, you'll get the person the regime want. So that is of vital importance, and it needs the federal government as well as provincial governments to change their legislation to make sure that we do have a democracy in Canada at the end of the day that is representative of the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. Next, it is our honor to invite MP Jenny Kwan to speak. Jenny has been the MP of Vancouver East ever since 2015. She has always been a strong advocate for measures to counter foreign interference and transnational repression. And she is also one of the witnesses in the public inquiry. Jenny, please.
Thank you very much, Gloria, and thank you also for convening all of us, to all the coalition members that are here today. I especially like to extend my thanks for the organizations, for the individuals who spoke up and spoke out about foreign interference and the impact that they have experienced. It takes a lot of courage to stand up in the face of the threats, the harassment, the attempt to silence the voices of those who are trying to uphold human rights and to face transnational repression threats, not just for themselves, but for their family members here and abroad. The Hogue inquiry was a necessary measure that I was glad to see that all parties, all members of the legislature of the parliament had actually supported with the inquiry. The recommendations, the final report, was something that we had waited for a very long time for. It comes with a number of significant recommendations, and I'm here to say what needs to happen is for a bipartisan approach to be taken by all parties to adopt these recommendations and to act with them. There are measures that can be taken without legislative changes, and that should happen. There are measures that require legislative changes. That too should happen. We are at the cusp of an election. And I still recall there was great urgency for the government to bring forward Bill C-70. Parliamentarians came together to expedite the passage of the bill. The bill has been passed, but yet to date, we have yet to see the regulatory measures on the implementation of Bill C-70. The public has yet to receive real information on how the act will be enforced. How is this possible? When the government says they care deeply about foreign interference, why are they still continuing to foot drag action? We need Bill C-70 to be in place with the regulatory measures. We need that in place before the next federal election. I want to touch a moment on transnational repression. During the inquiry, we had heard from witnesses, some of them in the public realm, some of them in more of a private setting with the commissioner. What the commissioner has indicated clearly is that transnational repression is happening in Canada. While it wasn't her mandate to look into the matter, nonetheless, it is happening. The question here is this: what is the government doing about it? What protective measures are being put in place for individuals in our community that are being impacted, that are being threatened, that are being harassed right now? I know of one individual, a Hong Konger, who spoke up and spoke out about this issue. And the individual was indeed threatened. The individual received threatening calls directly to their home. This was reported to the RCMP. The RCMP investigated, and even at the moment of that investigation was supposedly ongoing, a threatening phone call came to them as this was happening. And then afterwards, it was brushed off as some sort of misunderstanding, some sort of mistake, some sort of joke. Well, I gotta tell you, it's no joke when you receive a call of somebody threatening your life. It is not a joke. But that is what's happening and how it is being treated. So we have to take this seriously. The government has to take this seriously. Measures need to be put in place, action needs to be taken to send a clear message to foreign interference actors that Canada will not tolerate this and that we will take action to protect our community, the diaspora community. We also know from the Hogue inquiry that proxies are being used. Proxies, whether it's an individual or an organization, is being used to suppress points of view from Canadians, to harass Canadians, to pose a threat to Canada's basic democracy. That issue, while it was touched on, it was highlighted in the report, there's a real question in terms of action that's required from the government once again. What will the government do to address this issue? How will the government ensure that proxies are being dealt with in an effective manner? The implementation of Bill C-70 with regulatory measures would have been one approach, but still, we do not have that act in full implementation. And this is not acceptable. And I say this not as a partisan comment, because this impacts all of us. Doesn't matter what political party you're from, it impacts all of us, all Canadians, all individuals that are here in Canada. And finally, I would say this. We, as political parties, need to take immediate action to guard against foreign interference actors that are trying to infiltrate into our political apparatus within parties. Our leader, Jagmeet Singh, has already, right out of the gate, with the tabling of the report, said that we, the NDP, would adopt all of the recommendations related to the governing of a party with nomination processes. This needs to happen for all political parties. That is one way to ensure that we do not have foreign interference actors manipulating the process and end up electing people in whatever level of government that would compromise the integrity of Canada's interest. Right now, we're faced with threats all over the place. The United States, to be sure, who's threatening our own sovereignty. Now, they're not hiding it. They're doing it on the public record. But that said, doesn't matter if it's on the public record or behind the scenes, under the cracks, behind bushes, in the dark, where this is happening, we all have a responsibility to protect Canada, our sovereignty, our democratic institutions, and ultimately, our democracy. This is what is necessary. So I'm here to say I stand with the community in your call for action. Absolutely, I will do everything I can to push forward to continue this fight, because what is at risk is our democracy, and we cannot allow for this to carry on and tolerate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jenny. And last of all, on behalf of the two coalitions, I would like to emphasize on 2 points as our concluding remarks. Number one, as the 2025 federal election is imminent, it is necessary to get the Foreign Influence Registry up and running as soon as possible. Already, we have seen signs of infiltration and foreign interference in nomination campaigns in various swing ridings. If no action is taken by the government, the foreign interference experience in 2019 and 2021 elections will repeat itself. Number two, as coalitions of diaspora communities, we jointly urge the current and future governments to address in a responsible and timely manner the recommendations put forward by Foreign Interference Commission and civil society, including our coalitions, to protect the security of diaspora communities and Canada's democracy. We call for urgent action to combat foreign interference and transnational repression. We also call upon all political parties, including our government, to put our national interests above party interests. We need action now. Thank you. Now we welcome questions from the media.
Jenny, I wonder if you could tell me what has the NDP done to protect itself against foreign interference infiltrating its party? You said everyone has a role here.
As indicated, our leader, Jagmeet Singh, right out of the gate has committed that we would abide by the recommendations from the Hogue inquiry with nomination processes. What is required, of course, some of that is changes in legislation as well. We need the Elections Act to change, and I would further say that it's not just at the federal level where this needs to happen. This needs to happen at every single level, whether it's provincial or municipal. We know that foreign interference actors are trying to perpetrate their activities all throughout. And so, you know, the government needs to take action. And I would say, not just government, every leader needs to stand up and step out and say that they will follow those recommendations, that they will work collaboratively across partisan lines to enact those measures. This is what is required, and I think time is of the essence, given that we are literally on the eve of an election.
Ms. Kwan, you said that C-70 has not fully been implemented. Which measures in C-70 are you particularly concerned about not being implemented at the moment?
Well,
because some of the laws have taken effect. So what are you concerned about?
Well, there are no regulatory measures at all with Bill C-70, and that needs to...
are you talking about?
The Bill C-70 would require, for example, for the government to bring in regulations related to it. The government has said that they were embarking on a consultation process. Where is that consultation process? Where is it at? How is the public being educated on how to implement Bill C-70? And so that people can have the knowledge base, that they don't end up inadvertently, for example, find themselves to be in violation of the Act. We know that the use of proxies is happening, as indicated by the Hogue Commission. Are organizations being made aware of what that looks like? Are individuals being made aware of what that looks like? Are businesses made aware of what that looks like? And what would constitute foreign interference? So in view of the fact that none of this information is out there, none of the action has been taken by the government, then we do not have in place full implementation of Bill C-70. It's not good enough. We know that when the government made the commitment that they were going to bring forward a registry, they foot dragged that process. It took a long time for them to finally table the legislation. Once they tabled it, parliamentarians came together and expedited the process. So what is that registry? Where is that registry? What does that registry look like? And what are the requirements for people to follow the law, as it were, with the registry? We have none of that information.
Basically last week of the leadership race for the federal Liberals. Are you satisfied with measures they've taken to make sure foreign interference is not a problem in their race?
Well, actually, I'm not part of the Liberal Party, and I have no information on how they are running their nomination and what that process is. We know that some candidate has been disqualified. We don't know why. Was foreign interference an issue, for example? I don't know. What exactly have they put in place with their nomination process? They haven't shared that with me, so I would not be able to comment on that. What they should do, though, is to make the clear commitment is that they would adopt all of those recommendations and put the laws in place. Why is the House prorogued right now? We could actually be in the House of Commons right now dealing with all of this and bringing in legislative changes that are required per the recommendations from Justice Hogue. Why aren't we?
Yeah, maybe I can give my comment, on that aspect.
Actually, stand up to the mic.
Oh, okay. For diaspora communities, we have been monitoring, collecting data, and also analyzing infiltration and foreign interference that has been taken place on the ground in nomination campaign as well as leadership campaign. We consider these two to be the weakest points in our democratic processes. And that's why in public inquiry, we call for foreign interference to cover nomination campaign and leadership campaign as well. And we also call upon Elections Canada to tighten up its rules and regulations with respect to the voter eligibility in terms of age of 18, party membership, contribution to candidates should also be declared transparently. And so there are lots of recommendations we have made to the government and also concerned departments. However, Election Canada's guidelines and protocols do not have that mandatory obligation upon all political parties yet. And that's why Jenny is completely correct that we don't know, even though there's guideline, but how is the Liberal Party implementing these guidelines in the current leadership campaign? We don't know. We don't have answer for that. Yes.
After all the time and expense of the inquiry, several of you specifically suggested today that foreign interference has been happening and will be affecting this spring's election campaign, which makes me wonder whether we've learned anything from this big inquiry process that we had. But for those of you who said you do believe that foreign interference is happening now and affecting the next vote, do you have a sense of how many ridings we're talking about here? Whether this is a couple of isolated things you've heard about, or whether we're talking dozens of ridings, multiple parties, like what is the extent, what is the scale? How big is the warning that you're sending up? Is it just about this one race where you saw something, or are we really kind of in a crisis situation here? I wouldn't mind hearing from a couple of you on this because you represent different groups looking for different things.
Maybe, Henry? Sure. You could.
Now, I come from Saskatchewan, and I actually ran in a party nomination, and I saw signs, not conclusive, but of foreign interference. For example, that last week when we were selling membership, a whole, I think almost 24 or more membership of Chinese name came up in the list of members who can vote. And also what I saw is also how the process of some of these nominations are happening. We had people in the particular nomination, we saw basically people coming in with different, the ID requirement is very low. Nobody's really managing that because a lot of them are not professionals, they are volunteers. And the other point is, we've got a lot of, because when party operates when people buy membership, they just have to, for most parties, they just declare, right? And nobody's going back and scrutinizing whether the things that they declare are actually what they are. And one last point is, it makes no sense at all when only citizens and people over 18 can vote in municipal, provincial, and federal election, that permanent residents and people in many parties, 14 can vote in nominations. That doesn't make sense at all. If you can't vote in the general, you should not be able to vote in nominations.
Just for my benefit, I'm sorry, we haven't met, I don't know you. So which riding, what party?
Well, it was actually a provincial nomination. And I'm sure if you search my name, you'll be able to find where it is. I have saw signs of it, right? A lot of these nominations, like, of course, we can't pinpoint that somebody deposit money and they're interfering, but I saw, like I said, a whole bunch of Chinese name popped up in that last couple of weeks when we were running the nomination. So stuff like that. And we also saw, when I was running, a lot of people registered with false address. And we had actually people on the phone who said to us that they actually don't live in the address that they bought a membership for. So they were helping a friend or stuff like that. And these are not just... And at the end, I'm not sure if they voted because we did not get a list of who voted. So that was the issue. So we did not know who voted. And these are, like I said, some of the loose loopholes that different parties have. And this is, we're talking the major federal parties and as well as the provincial parties, right? Which in many cases are even, the rules are looser than the federal parties. I'll give you an example. For example, in Saskatchewan, for provincial, there's no rules governing how much someone can contribute to a nomination contest. But in Alberta, there are rules. So that doesn't make any sense. In one province, we govern where and how much people can contribute to a nomination. In another province, we don't have any of that. We need to make sure that the things are coherent.
Thanks, Henry. I'll try to be very brief. When we're looking at foreign interference, I mean, these are nations that are very sophisticated in the tactics that they use. If we're looking at Russia, China, Iran, they're not waiting for an election to happen before they start trying to influence public opinion on various different issues. It may be foreign policy related issues. It may be domestic issues. They are doing this work full time 24/7. And we know the Russians, in fact, have been active in terms of their influence operations since the 1930s, 1940s. They've been doing it ever since then, improving their tactics, honing their strategies. And certainly with the advent of the internet, with AI, all of that has become, those efforts have intensified during that time. And we're seeing nations like Russia and China pour billions of dollars into these operations as well. In 2023 alone, Russia spent $1.6 billion on propaganda and disinformation operations. We know now from a U.S. Department of Justice indictment that just last year, $10 million was used by RT, which is being identified by Global Affairs as a significant arm of Russia's intelligence apparatus. $10 million was used to pay for far-right US and Canadian influencers to produce content online that basically targeted Canada, North and America, and related North American issues. So, you know, they're already pushing the needle on some of the most important issues of the day well before an election happens. So this is happening full time, and it requires a response that acknowledges this. And I feel like the Hogue report, and although her mandate was rather limited to elections, they should have been looking at our entire democracy and how it's impacted by influence operations.
Point taken on that. The reason I'm asking for any idea you have about the number of ridings that might be affected now is that I have heard people speak of the Hogue report and say, well, there was just these few ridings, and with all due respect to the seriousness of the issues you raised, Ms. Kwan, during the inquiry, it was possible for some people to say, well, it was only this race and this nomination, because those were the only cases documented by the commission. We didn't get a sense of, well, this could be affecting up to 150 ridings or whatever. I take from this group that it's not just a few isolated cases.
No, it's not just a few isolated cases, and I'll just answer very quickly. When we look at the impact of these operations, it's not helpful to just look at specific ridings. It happens there, but the impact is far broader. It's on on national public opinion, that's how we need to look at the impact of foreign interference.
Maybe I can jump in here as well to add this. One of the flaws, I would say, of the government's approach in looking at foreign interference during the election period, even thereafter, was to look at the threshold on whether or not the electoral outcome might have been changed. That is not the question. And throughout the entire inquiry, points were made about the fact that individuals might have been impacted, proxies might have been used, and individual ridings might have been used. And even though the outcome might not have changed, it was never actually registered anywhere along the way for the government to flag this as a major concern. The reality, of course, is that there are witting or unwitting or semi-witting candidates or even staff that might be impacted. So it's out there everywhere. We know that. So the question becomes, what are we going to do about it? One of the issues to the question around the registry is that you require people to register. If you are working or in support of a foreign country to advance a perspective, there's nothing wrong for you to say this on the public record. It is only when you hide it and you don't tell the public and be transparent about it that it becomes an issue. So for all of those who are potential proxies, right, people need to know, and so that they need to actually register according to the law so that it is all public and transparent to try and address the whole issue of this dark process of how foreign actors are influencing our democracy. The election is coming, and what we do know that this is going to continue to happen. And so there are a number of different things that needs to be in place, including the communications, which the Hogue report had highlighted as a colossal disaster and failure through the entire process. I would even argue some of the systems is dysfunctional, is not working. And so what's that, how is the government doing on that front? What are they going to do to ensure that that doesn't repeat itself during the election campaign? So there's much work to be done. We're only scratching the surface of it, and it's not really how many ridings would necessarily be impacted. One instance is too many, and it cannot be tolerated.
You referred to Parliament being prorogued a couple of times. Sorry, I just had one more question for Ms. Kwan. You referred to Parliament being prorogued.
Actually, I would like to follow up on the point she made very quickly. Sure. Yeah. I think, generally speaking, the Foreign Interference Commission's final report has downplayed the magnitude and the level of adverse impact of foreign interference in Canada. As Jenny has pointed out, actually I would like to add to that. As diaspora community member and also analyst on foreign interference, we have observed much worse foreign interference and infiltration on the ground. And actually it's happening now, preparing for 2025 election. I cite you an example. Already in various writings, WeChat groups that are semi-private or totally private have been set up to facilitate the spread of fake news respect to candidates in all these writings. And top-down, well-orchestrated messages have been sent out in the WeChat group and quickly reiterated by a few other players within the same group, discrediting candidates that are critical of foreign regimes. And of course, they also support the other candidate that is not critical. And in Markham Unionville, they even frame one of the outspoken candidates to be criminal fugitive from Hong Kong just because he was on the warrant list of CCP recently. And in other writings, the same is also happening. And actually, this kind of disinformation campaign is not confined to WeChat. It is also being amplified by all the processes that have been formed in Canada over the last few decades. And they are the chief organizations to amplify the foreign regime's official narrative. And already in various websites, we see advertisement of various events promoting their preferred candidate. And at the same time, just recently, one of the former Conservative MP, Wei Yang, even quoted Commissioner Hogue's statement that there's no traitor as a means to justify that there's no foreign interference. So this kind of fake news just goes on and on. But because of the long delay in implementation of Bill C-70, even though some of the Act's regulations have already been drafted, but the appointment of the Foreign Interference Commissioner has not been finalized yet, and neither has the government decided what to do with the institution responsible for coordination and monitoring of foreign interference all over Canada. And therefore, there's still a vacuum there. And actually, I just spoke to the Ministry of Public Safety recently, and they said that it's not ready for up and running yet. I say the election is coming. And Commissioner Hogue also mentioned about the need for a central hotline that is accessible and that is transparent to be set up to facilitate the reporting of incidents of foreign interference. And it's not there yet. So what is the government doing? Why is our government delaying the process of implementation?
Just to pick up on that,
yes.
The government passed C-70, made changes to the Security of Information Act, the Criminal Code,
yes.
the Canada Evidence Act. It is now law. Are you saying that those provisions cannot be used to address the things that you're bringing forward today, that they're useless?
Well, the regulations, some of the regulations have already been completed, as far as I know. But neither the Enforcement Department nor the diaspora, the general Canadians, know about their existence and also the stage of development. And also, if they ever observe any signs of infiltration, incidents of foreign interference, to which party should they report this to? So there's no central reporting mechanism being made available to general Canadians yet. And this is of utmost importance. We need to act on it and set it up as soon as possible so as to enhance transparency in our democratic process. At least the government could be informed by us, who know so much better than the government what is going on the ground in various writing, so that the Enforcement Department can take quick action in charging the foreign agents.
Can I just very quickly, I don't think we answered your question about how much is affected. What I was trying to point to you is that it is happening on different levels of government. And what I point to you are irregularities. Of course, irregularities right now, they aren't being investigated. There are irregularities in many nominations, not just regimes, but different regime and different groups of people are trying to interfere. And these are things amounting to fraud, bribery, and stuff like that. Whoever does it, whether it is foreign regimes or not, needs to be, we need to take it seriously, because as different people have said, one vote, even one vote, is too much. And what I wanted to point is that it's happening on provincial levels, and they need different, provincial government needs to tighten up as well, right?
Would your party be willing to have Parliament sit once this leadership race is done to get to some of these recommendations that do require legislative changes?
I believe that our leader has already indicated that the House should be recalled, not only to address some of these critical issues in terms of foreign interference activities, but as well as the threat from the United States, from Trump, as an example. So we actually have time. I mean, this whole period where we're just, where the Parliament is vacant and that work is not being done because the Liberals are trying to elect a leader. They can elect their leader, but this work still can be done. And if there's will from parliamentarians in a bipartisan way to say that this, oh no.
Okay, so no more question, okay. Thank you very much. Okay, so I would like to thank all of you again for attending our press conference today. Thank you very much. And the media release has been sent out to all media today via Media Gallery. So if you have any question, we have our number on the release, so you are most welcome to contact us. And we are also available for one-on-one interview now. Thank you.